Muammar Gaddafi is now blaming the chaos in his country on Osama bin Laden, al-Qaeda, and the latest target of Gaddafi's efforts to now try and convince people in his country to help stop this rebellion. But even the violent crackdowns, which have left thousands of people dead, have not succeeded in suppressing this uprising. Now, protesters have now moved in on the capital city of Tripoli, where it has now been reported that Gaddafi has hired mercenary forces to protect his crumbling regime. At this point, it's anybody's guess as to just how long he can maintain his grip on power, and it's Iran that may be benefiting from all this chaos. Now, according to the New York Times, Iran has, quote, already benefited from the ouster or undermining of Arab leaders who are its strong adversaries and has begun to project its growing influence. And as the administration fumbles its response to the crisis, it may need to go back to the basic when it comes to Libya. Now, yesterday, the White House Twitter feed announced that the president would address the situation in Libya, and they misspelled the name of that country. And joining me now with analysis, what confidence, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, who was involved in the planning of America's 1986 airstrikes against Libya and who had a hit put on him by Colonel Gaddafi himself. Well, first of all, we came within an inch of Reagan came that close to taking him out.
Pretty close. And again, as we all acknowledge, we have an executive order that forbids the assassination of foreign leaders. And so, as I wrote in my book, if a bomb just happened to hit where he was, no one was going to be sorry about it. And that's still the case today, and it's going to be his own people who finish him off. He has no place to hide. This brutal despot who has killed thousands and thousands of people over the years, tried to kill my family. This is a man who is, and quite frankly, you and I both have enormous admiration for George W. Bush, but how the administration could acknowledge this government and set up a program with this guy to have military-to-military contacts is beyond me. But they did. And this man is now going to go at the end of a gun, either his own or one of his people.
Well, all right. So, but I want to go back here to your involvement. You helped plan this attack that landed right on his house. By accident.
The predicate is that, of course, he had orchestrated a bombing in Berlin that killed 27 Americans.
At this discotheque in Berlin, and we lost
a Bell Disco.
Right.
And we lost 27 Americans, 50-some-odd folks, Germans and Americans and allies wounded in it. And
Reagan responded.
In the aftermath, we planned very carefully how would we respond. The president directed that it would be an attack on the terrorist training centers and command and control nodes. That's exactly what it was. It just happened that Gaddafi was at one of those sites. The bomb missed his shelter, whatever it was. He says it was a tent, that he was out there in it. I don't believe it. He also claims that his daughter was killed and there's photographs taken. It wasn't his daughter. Nonetheless, this guy has managed to survive, not just the United States, but dozens of others. And I would make the point that we lost 2 airmen in that attack because the French wouldn't let us overfly France to attack him.
And we had the Pan Am incident over Lockerbie.
In '88.
All right, but now, how did you know it was him that ordered the hit on you?
Well, without going beyond what I can say, we have intelligence means to know when he was communicating with various people, like the People's Committee for Libyan Students in McLean, Virginia, where they ordered the hit as an anniversary. They wanted it to happen. They wanted to take out. I was on a list of people that had been targeted. They wanted the hit to go on the anniversary of our raid a year later. And thankfully, the FBI alerted us and got us out of town. And
if you look at Chancellor Merkel, if you look at Prime Minister Cameron, if you look at President Sarkozy, they all had much stronger statements about all of this. As the Washington Post or Compost, they named him, as you say. You know, why was President Obama the last to speak up on Libya and, frankly, the weakest?
Well, this has been a weak response right from the get-go. This is an administration that, from the very beginning, and people forget, this didn't begin in Tunisia. It actually began in Lebanon. The Prime Minister of Lebanon comes and begs for American support because Hezbollah is about to take over. There's riots in the streets. He could have stood up at that point and, on principle, and said, we believe in the human rights of people to assemble freely, to exchange information. Yeah. He didn't do it. He didn't do it in Tunisia until Ben Ali's on his way out.
He didn't do it in Iran in 2009.
He's never done it in Iran. I mean, if you think about what transpires in Iran, he's never done it. And Iran is, as has been pointed out by many, the ones who are going to benefit the most from
All
this.
right. Egypt, Jordan, Yemen, Tunisia, Libya, Bahrain, Morocco. Look, there are those that are arguing that this is, a peaceful, democratic uprising in the Middle East is going to be forever changed. Here's my question. I am not as confident as everybody else because public opinion polls, for example, in Egypt, show support for Sharia law. And that apostates should be killed, and that people that steal should have their arms cut off, and women and men should be segregated in the workplace.
Here's what apparently they don't understand at the White House is democracy is not based on an election. Democracy is a process that occurs when institutions and rule of law and a constitution that people can abide by, and you have court systems that work. None of that exists in any of these countries. And so what you've got is the fomenting of this rebellion that's now taking place throughout the Middle East in places that are very important to us. And there's no principle behind it. Sometimes Obama says the right thing. Sometimes he says nothing. Sometimes he lets people like the students in Tehran be bludgeoned to death on the streets and says not a word. Right. So you can't choose where democracy is going to break out.
Why are you, first of all, we know what his future is. You don't think Gaddafi makes it?
I give to Gaddafi at the most 2 weeks. He said, this is a man who said in that very strange speech you just put on the screen, he wants to be a martyr. There are many people who are going to oblige him. I personally hope it's a very painful experience.
Well, all right, fair enough, and I'll concur with you. All right, so then what's the future for him? What's the future for North Africa? What's the future for the Middle East? If my guess is that we risk more extremism.
Oh, much more. And there are very few options left to this administration because decisions made by the Obama administration to take carriers offline and ships offline mean we have no ability to respond in any way militarily. We have no carriers in the Mediterranean today for the first time in 31 years. You now have no American carriers in the Mediterranean, no battle groups, and you have Iranian ships, because this administration has made bad decisions all the way along the line. It's not a good formula, Sean. The good news is, at the end of the day, Muammar Gaddafi is a dead man.
Yeah, well, I hope and pray you're right. Colonel, we're glad he was not successful.
I am too. I wouldn't be here.
You wouldn't be here. All right, good to see you, my friend. Appreciate you. And let not your heart be troubled. Our great, great, great American panel is next. And tonight on our great, great American panel, he is a Fox News legal analyst. Peter Johnson Jr. is with us. He ran for Congress in Colorado's 7th Congressional District this past year and is now the president and CEO of Western Skies Forum. Ryan Fraser is here, and she's a former reporter and the host on Fox Sports, currently the host of Mark Levin's favorite program, NBC's Poker After Dark, model, TV personality. And she looks like she's ready to go to, a fashion show. Recently married, Leanne Tweeden. Good to see you all. All right, let's start with Matt Capiano. This is the congressman, and this is what he said. Things need to get a little bloody every once in a while, speaking of union members.
I'm proud to be here with people who understand that it's more than just sending an email that gets you going. Every once in a while, you got to get out of the streets and get a little bloody when necessary.
A little bloody when necessary?
Yeah, it's an incitement. I mean, are we watching Fist? Is this Sly Stallone? I mean, but it appears to me that big union tactics have extended to the political realm of the Democratic Party. They're using big labor techniques now in the halls of Congress and in the state capitals. Walkout. We've seen a walkout in the state of Indiana, in the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah. And add to that, by the way, the president ignoring the Defense of Marriage Act. I mean, it's almost, what's going on?
Well, I think, Sean, it's interesting. It seems like all the talk about civility is going out the door when the issue is your issue. I think that for these folks, when it comes to Governor Walker, comparing this governor to Hitler or to Mubarak, I think it's just absurd. This is a guy who's trying to tackle a budget deficit of over $137 million.
This year.
This year.
$3.6 billion in 2
years. By 2013. He's trying to reform government. And, reform's painful, but it needs to be done.
Yeah. I think it's very sad because after what happened to Congresswoman Giffords, I thought both sides of the aisle called for civility. Let's be human here. And like you said, when it affects them, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm a union guy, you're affecting me, so now I'm going to say, it's okay for me to say it's time to get a little bloody, let's fight this. And, you know, when you're...
Let me give you, because there was widespread condemnation of the Tea Party movement, even when there was no evidence to back it up. Here is an African-American Tea Party member who's a victim of racist comments at a union rally in Colorado.
You're uneducated, unethical, immoral, and you don't know what life is. That's your problem.
Well, obviously, I got your attention because you're over here trying to convince me otherwise.
Why don't you go behind that fence where you belong?
I'll stand right where I'm at as long as I want. I just asked you a simple question. Got it?
Why don't you go back where you belong?
I'm having a really good time right here.
From my brothers and sisters that stand here, and yours are down there.
You're missing your rally. Why don't you go over there and cheer with all the rest of your buddies, since that's why you came down here.
Question, do you have any children?
Do I need children?
That you claim.
Do I need children to understand what's going on?
You need children to understand education.
No, I don't.
It's vile. Go back where you belong. Be with your own kind. What kind of children are you going to claim? I wonder if Democratic leaders will be questioned on Meet the Press, whether they will disavow that conduct and disavow those statements in the same fashion that Republican leaders go on these shows and are challenged to say, well, someone said something in a focus group somewhere on the Hannity show once, and what do you say about that? Well, what does the Democratic Party say about that?
Great point.
No, I don't know if it was racist or not, but I will tell you this much. If the shoe had been on the other foot, had a conservative at a Tea Party said something similar to a liberal protesting that rally, media would be ablaze on this issue.
We saw the comments recently about Clarence Thomas. He should be lynched, him and his wife.
Of course. That woman in red, it's embarrassing to me. I was embarrassed for her, and I was embarrassed for all Americans that would come out of her mouth to somebody that was sitting there protesting peacefully. They got up in his face, and, you know, what happened to civility in America? What happened to our right to sit there and have different opinions and to have those opinions without directly attacking somebody? And then attacking him like that was just, it was awful.
All right, we got to take a break. By the way, we have a tradition when Leanne's here. She gets to throw us out. Ready?
That's right.
All right, wait. All right, now more with our Great American Panel.
Yeah.
And we continue now with our Great American Panel. We have another advertising controversy, this one in New York. And we'll roll video of this. And it says, the most dangerous place for an African-American is in the womb. Very provocative. We have a lot of ads up in New York like that. Billboards, Times Square is full of them. A lot of times people are half naked. This has gotten a lot of reaction. What do you think, Leanne?
You know...
Well, the abortion rate in the African-American community is 5 times that in the white community and 2 to 1 to the Hispanic community.
And I know a lot of people are angry at Planned Parenthood because they feel like that, you know, a lot of women that happen to be black that are not married, that have children, go to have abortions. But, you know, that's a shock value tactic, and maybe it's going to work. I don't know if it's going to work for the women that are having the abortions. I don't know if they're going to care about that sign. You know, I think that abortion shouldn't be paid with taxpayers' money, but I think that it should be available. I think it should be available.
All right, so we have this is the.
I know, Sean.
Go ahead.
Well, let me just say this, that I don't think the billboard was the right way to advocate for life, because I don't think it'll change any hearts or minds.
Right.
But that doesn't take away from the very real fact that there are far too many abortions happening within the minority community. That's a very real issue that we ought to work towards.
Also, big business. There's a lot of money being made off abortion, and I hate to, get to the brass tacks. And taxpayer-supported abortions and Planned Parenthood, et cetera, is a big deal.
I believe in advocating for life as you do, and as we all do. But I think ads that use shame are probably not the best types of ads. And the thing that I found most objectionable about it is that the little girl didn't know she was going to be in that ad, and her mother didn't want her in that ad. Yeah. And so under those conditions...
That's fair. That's a fair criticism.
It shouldn't be. If she doesn't want to be in the ad, she shouldn't be in the ad.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So we found an area of disagreement. Because people on the left say they're pro-choice, but they're not pro-choice about my Second Amendment rights because they don't want people to have guns and handguns, et cetera. But here's my point, you know, and let's exempt rape, incest, or a mother's life being in jeopardy here. But people do have a lot of choices.
I agree.
You have a choice, you get in the back seat of a car. You have a choice, you start making out. You have a choice, you start removing articles of clothing. You have a choice whether you use, birth control. If you want to prevent a pregnancy, you can do that.
I agree.
There's a lot of choices leading up to, quote, this choice.
Well, I think that then obviously we know that probably in minority communities there is a problem with the education. It's like AIDS in Africa. The education is the problem, and I think it may be, in those communities where they're not.
But there's another problem. The message that you've just given, Sean, is delegitimized in this country. That message is made fun of, and it shouldn't be.
You mean
made
being
fun
responsible?
Of. Absolutely. It's a legitimate, important message that has to go out to all communities.
Right.
I agree.
I think that needs to start at the home with the parents.
All communities. And that's the key word, all communities.
But Sean's point is so important, but people want to say, oh, come on, please, what century are we in? Well, we understand what century we're in.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, this is an area that's ripe for more alternatives for families in terms of alternatives to abortion, adoption, and other services that encourage people to realize they do have choice.
Right.
The choice to allow that child.
Let me ask you one last question.
You know it's going to happen, even if there wasn't abortion in America. It's going to be happening in people's homes, and, people are going to get sick and die. People are still going to have abortions even if there was not an abortion clinic. Some woman's going to be doing it, or a girl's going to be doing it with a coat hanger, and I don't want that either.
Well, I don't want that either, but I
don't think that's the rationale.
I agree with you.
I understand all the arguments on it, and I've looked at all the arguments, and I'm still pro-life.
Yeah, I am too. Look, I think people, I don't want to be the nanny state. I don't want people saying you can't put salt on your food. I don't want lectures from the government whether or not I can buy a soda or have a soda tax, or, the government makes more money off tobacco than tobacco companies, but they're so against tobacco.
Right.
All right, guys, good to see you all. Thank you for being with us. Are you going to throw us out there again? All right, ready? First you have to catch it. Now, just from the shoulder, okay?
Okay.
All right, there we go. And thanks for being with us. Let not your heart be troubled. The news continues. Greta's next to go on the record. She's standing by. Greta, take it away.